Hey everyone. So here we are, day 7 of my 30-day ideas challenge. So I wanted to do a little bit of a chat or discussion on sleep, because it's one of those things. It's something that we take for granted, but when it goes pear-shaped, when we start to have problems, either falling asleep or staying asleep, or waking up a lot or waking up too early, we start to then realize, oh my gosh, I did have it good. Like, sleep is just paramount and the cornerstone to good health. So when people talk about, oh, I want more energy and I want more vitality and I want to power through the day and all those sort of things, it all starts with sleep. I mean, sleep is foundational for good health and well-being on all levels. Like, let's face it. I mean, we know that. I mean, even emotionally, mentally, and of course physically, but spiritually, all levels and layers. If you're not getting good sleep, you are not going to be able to, show up as all that you are meant to be, all that you want to be. And it's interesting, sleep was something I really struggled with for many, many years. Even as a child, I was a bit scared of the dark, so I wasn't a sound sleeper. And then as I got older, it got better. And then after a period of years of, work and study and stress, being in fight or flight, I kind of got stuck. And it was like in 2011, I had a routine surgery, and all of a sudden I just couldn't sleep. So it was like the surgery was the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, and that's definitely what the case was with me. And so I was on this quest, and I mean, at the time I hadn't long finished my herbs and my nutrition, so I was practicing that, but I was trying all the various nutrients. I was omitting foods, I was adding in foods, I was trying herbs and things like that. And some helped somewhat and some didn't. And it was interesting because from then on I was working in pharmacies and health food store and clinic. And, it was interesting what worked for some people and what didn't for others. And I, of course, was looking at the research and looking at the doses. And of course, as soon as I'd see new research about something, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to try that. And so I ended up putting together this book, and it's very aptly named, and it's 137 tips for reclaiming deep restorative sleep every night. And, I thought, well, why not 137? Because that was the number of the tips that I had. And it's things that, you've probably heard of, but there's a lot of things you probably haven't heard of. And I do sort of cite various, studies and things that you can reference if you want to. But if you don't, you can just look at it and, oh, okay, let me see. That sounds interesting. Maybe I'll go and speak to my healthcare practitioner about that one. Because as we know, we've all got different backgrounds. Different people are on different medications or different life stages. So, of course, if you're pregnant or lactating or you're on medication or, whatever it might be, it's really important that you're working with your healthcare practitioner, as it is for all of us. But anyway, so in here, I kind of list even things like, EMRs, because that can affect people's sleep quality, because people who are really quite sensitive to these electromagnetic radiation frequencies. And, there's Gauss meters and things like that, where you can actually look at the levels that are, being emitted by, the fridge and other kind of electronic goods. And that's sort of quite interesting. Also, even things like, wearing blue blocker glasses at night, that's quite useful. So I do often wear that if I'm doing stuff, but I don't tend to do it at night now unless I really have to. But that can be useful. Something else I always say to people is, let's first of all look at your caffeine, levels, because quite often people aren't aware of just how much caffeine is in various things that they're consuming each day. So, if you're having just say 2 cups of coffee, it doesn't sound like a lot. That might be about 220 milligrams roughly of caffeine. That can sort of push someone over the edge because, if you're more inclined to anxiety and stress and that kind of energy and way of being, anything above 210 can trigger per day, can trigger anxiety and palpitations and those associations. Also, don't forget green tea might have, say, roughly approximately 35 milligrams per cup of caffeine. Black tea might have like 65 milligrams. You might be having a supplement that has caffeine in there. You've got to look at the, when you look at the actives, looking at the constituents, just see, does it have caffeine? Some are a lot more than what you think. And then sometimes, there might be energy drinks out there that have got the caffeine. So it comes in various forms. And, you really want to make sure you're having it earlier in the day because caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours. So if you're having a cup of coffee at, say, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, by rights, that's not really being broken down and leaving your system until 10 p.m. that night. So that can affect your ability to fall asleep. So that's sort of something I definitely say. Just, be mindful of how much caffeine you're consuming and where it's coming from and what time of the day you're having it. Because some people might have like a black tea or something after dinner and they think, oh, that's nice, but it still does have caffeine. So if you're sensitive, that may impact your sleep or your sleep quality. Same with alcohol. Sometimes people say, oh, I need alcohol to help me sleep. But what they don't realize is, quite often what happens is you wake up in that liver time, which is like 1 to 3 a.m., when the liver's processing and, breaking down and, getting rid of the alcohol essentially. So, it's interesting that there's things like that. So that's why I say to people, take note of what time it is that you're waking up, because that can also give us insights. And then, of course, I do list various, as I said, nutrients that you can consider, things like weighted blankets, which we have a weighted blanket, which is really, myself and my partner really enjoy that. Even looking at things like, I talk about GABA, which, as we know, GABA is a inhibitory neurotransmitter, and it's kind of like the brakes to the pedal, like the pedal being the, adrenaline and noradrenaline, things like that. So you can get GABA in supplementation form. Once again, of course, you've always got to speak to your healthcare practitioner. And then we talk about, various other nutrients. There's various herbs. So, people always talk about valerian and hops and magnolia and kava and lemon balm. And then, of course, if there's a hormonal component, which often there is when it comes to sleep, say, for instance, it might be that you have, lower estrogen or lower progesterone or, high cortisol, things like that. There's various herbs that can help with balancing that or lowering that, or, so that's where it's useful. And I do list various functional labs and things like that that's worth exploring, because that can really kind of almost hone in on, okay, so this is why there is an issue. Because sometimes it might even be that there's a gut imbalance, because, if 90% of serotonin approximately is produced in the gut, serotonin's a precursor to melatonin. Melatonin's a sleep hormone. Well, maybe there's a lot that we need to look at in the gut. And of course, even parasites and things can be more active at night. So there's, gut microbiome mapping kind of functional labs. And then, of course, you can be looking at your hormones. You can be looking at your adrenals, your cortisol, DHEA, the sex hormones. And, there's various tests. There's Dutch hormone tests, like that you use a dried urine spot. There's blood tests. There's saliva, which is quite good for cortisol, monitoring and things like that. So all of that is in here. And I do sort of talk about various conditions that it might be worth talking to your practitioner about. And the reason, as I said, I wanted to put all this together is because, when I sort of first went to, say, a doctor, and, nothing against, there's a time and a place for everything, but the first thing that he had prescribed me was an antidepressant, which I didn't want to go down that path. And because I just felt that wasn't actually addressing why I couldn't sleep. And, so that's where it gets frustrating, that people will go to see doctors or will go and see, I don't know, a sleep specialist. And even a sleep specialist can be misleading in the sense that some are only looking more for sleep apnea and things like that. And that can, by all means, definitely be an issue. But you really want to be looking holistically at the person, as always, and say what is contributing to it. And see, there can even be things like unprocessed and unresolved trauma, because, if there's trauma sitting there in the nervous system, keeping it sort of in that fight or flight energy, that's creating more cortisol. That's affecting sleep quality. So, sometimes it's things like that. And, what helps that? Like, it's working with a trauma coach, or it's, the EFT and the breath work and the meditation and the mindfulness, and all of those things come into play. There's exercises that help engage the vagus nerve, because, sometimes you could be having poor vagal tone, which a lot of people with poor sleep have as well, because they're doing, studies, and they have done studies on activating the vagus nerve for conditions like anxiety and insomnia and things like that. So hopefully this is kind of helping somewhat. But as I said, like and by all means, you don't have to go out and buy my book, but it was just really to say that if sleep is an issue for you, there is so many different things that you can explore. It's not like, as I said, what are you worrying about? Just relax. It's like, no, that doesn't often help. Like, you've got to drill deeper and see, well, why is there a dysfunction there? Is it the fact that, yes, there is higher cortisol, there's lower melatonin, there's lower estrogen, there's a gut imbalance, whatever it might be. Or, as I said, maybe there is that unresolved trauma that's sitting there. Maybe there's suppressed emotions that need addressing and processing. So, there's so many facets of sleep. Like, it's interesting because, they know there's the 5 stages of sleep. You've got the, non-REM stages, you've got the REM stages, and both are important for optimal sleep. But, they still don't know a lot about sleep in a lot of ways. It's kind of quite mysterious. And, we know it's a time when the body is healing and regenerating. So it is important. And as I said, anyone can tell you have a crap night's sleep, it affects you the next day on all levels. And I mean, if you have an ongoing problem, I know when I was really in the thick of the insomnia, it was like it really affected every level of my life. I became antisocial. I had a real sense of apathy almost, like I just didn't care. And, and it's really hard to be like that when you know that there's so much more, that that's not your natural mode or where you want to be. And it does make it really hard. So as I said, I really feel like for most people, for everyone, you've really got to be ensuring that your sleep quality is on point. Like, it really is the foundation for good health and vitality and radiance. So on that note, I do have to go because I need to finish getting ready because it is Friday night, so it's date night. And I just got a little message saying we've got to go in a couple of minutes. So anyway, much love. Have a great weekend. And I will see you tomorrow night for day 8. Okay, bye.